I was gone from my old town for 31 days and no one asked why. Not a single call. Then my aunt posted one photo of my new living room on Facebook. Suddenly, my entire extended family was blowing up my phone, demanding the gate code to my building. My name is Claire Martin. I am 29 years old, for a living. I am a clinical specialist at Arcadia MedTech, right here in Lakeview. My job is to manage the integrity of data for clinical trials. I ensure complex protocols are followed precisely, that the advanced medical devices we develop are meticulously tested and proven safe long before they ever reach a patient. It is meticulous, demanding work. It requires precision, an unwavering attention to detail, and a rigid adherence to boundaries both ethical and procedural. I am, by every professional metric, very good at my job. My performance reviews are pristine. My colleagues respect my input. My work saves lives, in a quiet, data-driven way. This entire identity, however the competent professional, the respected specialist, evaporates the instant I use my key to unlock the front door of my parents' house, a 30-minute drive from my own apartment, every Saturday. For the last 5 years, ever since I moved out, and my sister Brielle started having children, I arrive at my parents' house at 11 a.m. I always carry 2 heavy grocery bags, filled with the ingredients for that day's lunch, ingredients that I paid for. This ritual is unspoken, unacknowledged by anyone else, yet it is as rigidly enforced as any protocol at Arcadia. It is the Claire contribution. My Saturdays are not my own. They have never been my own. They belong to the suffocating gravitational pull of the family home. I let myself in, and the scene is always the same. The television in the living room is blaring, tuned to some college football pre-game analysis. My father is already settled in his recliner, eyes locked on the screen. He offers a low grunt that passes for hello, his gaze never leaving the commentators. I navigate the battlefield of my niece's discarded toys, plastic castles with missing turrets, dismembered dolls, sticky iPads left on the floor to reach the kitchen. This kitchen, which I honestly know better than my own, is my designated station. It is where I perform my function. My father, as I said, is a satellite orbiting the NFL. His primary contribution to the day will be shouted commentary on the game and later, a brief, non-specific critique of the food I've cooked. My mother is the coordinator. She sits at the kitchen island, phone in her hand, managing the logistics of the chaos. She isn't managing me, of course. I am self-managing. I am the reliable, silent cog in her domestic machine. She directs the unpredictable elements, the nieces, the volume of the television, and most importantly, Brielle. Brielle, my older sister. Brielle is an entrepreneur, which in our family is a polite term for someone who sells mid-range fashion from her laptop via chaotic, filter-heavy live streams. Her income is, to put it kindly, volatile. 1 month she's flush, having had a viral haul, and the next she's tearfully complaining about rising shipping costs and the algorithm punishing her. But Brielle's breakthroughs, those rare dramatic spikes in her sales chart, are celebrated like national holidays. They are validation of her risk, her vision, her passion. My steady 6-figure salary, my benefits, my meticulously funded 401k, that's just expected. It's boring. It's the stable, invisible ground that allows Brielle to fly. And then there are the nieces, Ava, 6, and Mia, 4. They are loud, energetic, wonderful, and completely, utterly undisciplined. They are the twin centers of this family's universe, and I am their designated support staff. This particular Saturday was supposed to be different. I arrived with the usual groceries, a whole chicken, fresh pasta, asparagus, the ingredients for an apple pie, but I was also carrying something else. I was carrying news, big news. After 8 grueling months of interviews, project presentations, and navigating the delicate internal politics at Arcadia MedTech, I had been promoted, and not just promoted, but hand-selected for a strategic relocation. I found the family in their usual Saturday formation. Dad watching the screen, Mom scrolling. Brielle was already set up on the sofa, angled toward her phone, a bright white ring light clipped to the coffee table, already midstream. "Hey guys, this chiffon is just everything," she was cooing to her followers. "It's giving main character." I began the ritual, unpacking groceries, washing hands, pulling out the heavy wooden chopping board. I started dicing onions, the familiar sting in my eyes. I waited for a lull, a commercial break, anything. It came, briefly, between a car ad and a beer ad. "Hey everyone," I said, my voice cutting through the air slightly louder than I intended. "I have some news. I got the promotion." My father grunted. My mother looked up from her phone, her thumb hovering mid-scroll. "That's nice, dear. Senior something, right?" "Senior clinical specialist," I clarified, my chest tightening just a little. "And the position is based in Rainier City. They're relocating me. I'm moving." Silence. Not congratulations. Not Rainier City, that's amazing. Not, "When do you leave?" The silence was heavy, vacant, and immediate. My father's eyes flickered back to the television as the commercials ended. The game was back on. He was gone, absorbed. Brielle, visibly annoyed by the interruption to her audio, shot me a dark look. "Mom, can you tell the kids to be quiet? I'm live." She hadn't even registered what I'd said. Her entire world was contained in the little red live icon on her screen. My mother's gaze, however, sharpened, but not with pride. It sharpened with logistics. "Rainier City, Claire. That's over 1,000 miles away. What about Saturdays?" Before I could formulate a response, the game analyst shouted about a fumble, and my father roared, "Are you kidding me?" Simultaneously, my niece Ava ran through the living room, screaming, holding one of Brielle's sequin tops meant for her inventory. "Ava, put that down, Mom," Brielle hissed, angling the phone away from the chaos. My announcement, the single biggest achievement of my career, my entire future restructuring, had lasted approximately 4 seconds before being completely swallowed by the domestic noise. It dissolved. It was just another sound in a room full of competing stimuli. And it had lost. I turned back to the counter. I chopped the onions. I sautéed the garlic. I boiled the water. I roasted the chicken. I served the food. As we sat down at the table, or rather, as I placed plates in front of people scattered around the living room, I tried again. "The move is in 4 weeks," I said firmly. "Arcadia is handling all the logistics. It's a huge step up, a major increase in responsibility." My father shoveled pasta into his mouth. "Pass the cheese." Brielle, finally off stream, sat down, her phone still in her hand. "My engagement was up 12% today," she announced to the table, as if she were unveiling a cure for a disease. "My new supplier is really paying off. I think I'm finally going to break even on the spring line." And just like that, the conversational torch was passed. The next 45 minutes were dedicated to a deep dive, granular analysis of Brielle's online shop KPIs. We discussed her click-through rates. We dissected the A/B testing she was doing on her Instagram captions. My father, who did not know what a KPI was, nodded along, offering business advice gleaned from sports metaphors. "Got to play offense. Brielle, attack the market." My mother, the coordinator, was in her element. "Now, did you follow up on that bulk shipping discount? What about the influencer collaboration? Did she invoice you, or are you paying her in product? My promotion, a tangible, significant, 6-figure salary. Life-altering achievement recognized by a multi-billion-dollar medical technology corporation was invisible. It was abstract. It wasn't real in the way Brielle's hypothetical, fluctuating sales figures were. The meal wound down. My nieces, as usual, had barely touched their food, their plates still half full of the roasted chicken I had carefully seasoned. "Claire," my mother said, not looking up from her phone, where she was now helping Brielle search for new packaging vendors. "Can you cut up the rest of that chicken into little bites for the girls? They like it better that way." I looked at my sister, a 33-year-old woman, perfectly capable, scrolling through her phone, I looked at my father, already heading back to his recliner for the second half. I looked at my mother, outsourcing her parenting. Brielle, can't you do it? I asked, my voice flat, already knowing the answer. I'm working, Claire, Brielle snapped, as if I had just interrupted a vital board meeting. Just do it, honey, my mother said, waving a dismissive hand, her eyes still on Brielle's screen. You're not busy. You don't have kids to wrangle. It was the defining phrase of my adult life in this house. You're not busy. You don't have kids. It was the unspoken justification used to draft me into service, the silent, agreed-upon reason why my time was less valuable, my energy more expendable. I was the family's excess capacity. I stood up. I said nothing. I took the plates back to the kitchen. I stood at the counter and methodically cut the leftover chicken into tiny, perfect, bite-sized squares for my sister's children, my hands moving with an automation that scared me. As I cut the chicken, the memory of last Christmas surfaced, sharp, cold, and unwelcome. Brielle had received a massive, unexpected order for her holiday glam boxes. She was completely, hysterically overwhelmed. Claire, you have to help me, she had cried over the phone. I'll fail. I'll lose the business. Everything will be ruined. I had just finished a brutal quarter-end audit at Arcadia. I had 4 precious days of paid time off. 4 days I had planned to spend sleeping, reading, and existing in my own quiet, clean apartment. Instead, I spent those 4 days in Brielle's freezing garage, 96 hours of folding corrugated cardboard, stuffing crimson tissue paper, printing shipping labels, and wrapping cheap jewelry in bubble wrap. My father showed up once, called us Santa's little elves, and left. My mother brought us sandwiches, which we ate while still packing, our fingers covered in tape residue. By the 4th day, my hands were raw, the skin on my knuckles was split and bleeding, and I had a dozen tiny, stinging paper cuts across my fingertips from the sheer volume of cardboard. I had saved her Christmas rush. I had ensured her breakthrough, my Christmas gift from her. A 5% off coupon code to her store. For friends and family, she'd said, beaming, completely oblivious. That night, back in my own apartment, my quiet, clean, orderly sanctuary. I knew the verbal announcement hadn't landed. It hadn't been processed. They needed it in writing. I opened our family group chat. It was called The Circle, a name my mother had chosen. It included me, Mom, Dad, and Brielle. I typed the message carefully, clinically. Just to confirm what I mentioned at lunch today, I am accepting the promotion to Senior Clinical Specialist. My new role is based in Rainier City. I will be moving out of Lakeview on the 31st. I hit send. I watched as, one by one, the indicators appeared. Read by Mom, read by Dad, read by Brielle. 3 blue ticks. I waited. I stared at the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, waiting for that would mean someone, anyone, was typing a reply. Nothing. I waited 10 minutes, then 30. An hour passed. The blue ticks remained, stark and silent. No congratulations. No, we need to talk. No, wow. I put my phone down and tried to read a book, but the digital silence from the chat felt louder than any noise. I picked up the phone again and idly opened social media. A terrible habit. My mother's new post was at the top of my feed. It was a photo of Ava and Mia, faces sticky, forks in hand, attacking the last slices of the apple pie I had baked and left at the house. The caption read, "Nothing better than a Saturday with my grandbabies and homemade pie." They just loved it. Family time. Blessed grandkid love. She had tagged the location of the restaurant they went to last week. She had tagged the brand of plates they were using. She did not tag me. She did not mention who had spent 2 hours making the crust from scratch. That was the moment. That was when something inside me finally fractured. Sharp and clean. It wasn't the ignored promotion. It wasn't the analysis of Brielle's KPIs. It was the pie. It was the complete, effortless, and casual erasure of my contribution, of my very existence. I had been rendered invisible, reduced to a function the baker of pies, the cutter of chicken, the packer of boxes. I muted the circle. I turned my phone completely off, something I never, ever did. I sat on my sofa in the dark, and for the first time in my adult life, I cried, not loud. Dramatic sobs like Brielle. These were the quiet, hot, exhausted tears of someone who has finally realized they are completely, utterly alone in a room full of people who supposedly love them. The crying lasted for about 20 minutes. When I was done, I felt hollowed out, but also strangely light. The crushing guilt was gone. The suffocating sense of obligation had evaporated, leaving behind a cold, clear certainty. I turned my laptop on. I bypassed social media. I bypassed my work email. I opened a new browser tab and typed, "Luxury apartments for rent in Rainier City." I looked at listings for gleaming new buildings with floor-to-ceiling windows, rooftop decks, and state-of-the-art gyms, places where nobody knew me, places where I was not Brielle's sister, or the one who's good in the kitchen. I was leaving the cycle. I was done with Saturdays and duty. I was stepping out of the role they had cast me in, the role of the reliable, childless, endlessly available utility player. A small, hard promise began to form in my chest. From now on, my time was my own. My energy was my own. My front door would have a lock, and I would be the only one deciding who got a key. From now on, I would set the boundaries. The next 4 weeks were a blur of pure, focused logistics. I gave notice on my apartment. I signed a lease online for a beautiful one-bedroom place in Rainier City. I booked the moving truck. I systematically packed my entire life into medium-sized cardboard boxes. I did not go to my parents' house for the next 3 Saturdays. I texted, "Sorry, busy packing," and muted the ensuing, "But who will?" messages. The 31st arrived. It was 8 a.m., gray and damp. The moving truck, a massive 26-footer, rumbled to a stop in front of my building. Its air brakes hissing, the movers hopped out, clipboards in hand. I was taping the last box labeled "Kitchen Fragile" when my phone rang. The screen flashed Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost hit the red button, but I figured I should at least give them a final goodbye. I answered, "Hi, Mom. Claire, thank God." She interrupted, her voice already fraught with the usual Saturday morning panic. "Listen, Brielle has an emergency pop-up sale, and I have to drive your father to the podiatrist. I need you to come over and watch the girls, just for a few hours, like usual." I stopped. I stopped breathing. I looked out the window at the giant truck. I looked at the 2 large men in matching jumpsuits walking up my sidewalk. Like usual. The words hung in the air. A perfect, damning testament to just how little I existed to them outside of my function. I took a deep, steadying breath. The hard, clear promise I'd made to myself in the dark crystallized. It was time to use it. I stood frozen, the packing tape still in my hand, the phone pressed against my ear. The movers were walking up the path. "Mom," I said, my voice coming out colder and steadier than I expected. "I can't. I'm moving today. Right now. The truck is here." I stated it as a fact, a clinical observation, just like I would report a data anomaly at work. I sent a message to the circle 4 weeks ago. I continued into the silence. The 31st, that's today. The line was quiet. I could hear the faint, staticky sound of her breathing, the ambient noise of her kitchen. It was a short pause, maybe only 2 seconds, but it felt like an hour. In that gap, I could practically hear her mind processing the information, not as a personal event, but as a catastrophic logistical failure. Her reliable, free babysitting service was suddenly, inexplicably, offline. "Well," she finally said, her voice tight and clipped, all the fake panic gone, replaced by a sharp annoyance. "We'll have to talk about this later. I have to go." She hung up. She didn't say, "What are you talking about?" She didn't say, "Why didn't you say anything?" She didn't say, "Be safe." She said, "We'll talk about this later." The click of the disconnected call was deafening. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, not with anger, but with cold, indifferent dismissal. My move, my promotion, my entire life change was an inconvenience to be talked about later. One of the movers, a large man with a kind face, cleared his throat. "Ma'am Claire Martin, we're ready to start the walkthrough." I shoved the phone deep into the pocket of my jeans, burying it. "Yes, right. Let's start." The next few hours were a blur of organized chaos. I pointed at boxes. I signed papers. I directed the men. "This goes first." "That's fragile." And with every box they carried out, I felt a physical lightening. I was dismantling the life that had been a 30-minute drive from my family. I was packing up the Claire they knew, the endlessly available, endlessly capable, endlessly silent daughter, and shipping her away. By noon, the apartment was empty. It was just a hollow, beige box, echoing with the ghosts of my old life. I did a final sweep, my footsteps loud on the bare floors. I handed the keys to the building manager, got into my car, and followed the massive moving truck onto the highway. I didn't look back. The first 6 hours of the drive were pure adrenaline. I watched Lakeview shrink in my rearview mirror until it was just another cluster of buildings on the horizon. Then it was gone. Night fell. The moving truck, which I had been following, pulled off for the night at a designated depot. I was driving my own car straight through. I had a small, temporary corporate apartment waiting for me in Rainier City, paid for by Arcadia. I drove on, alone, into the darkness. The highway turned into a long, black ribbon, lit only by my headlights and the occasional passing truck. My GPS, a calm, disembodied voice, became my only companion. "In 2 miles, keep left. Continue for 180 miles. I drove through towns I'd never heard of, past blurry billboards, advertising local lawyers and 24-hour diners. The landscape flattened, then grew hilly, then flattened again. The air coming through the cracked window grew colder, sharper. It smelled like pine and damp earth, completely different from the humid, familiar air of Lakeview. Around 2 a.m., somewhere in a state I didn't recognize, my phone, which I had plugged into the charger and tossed onto the passenger seat, lit up. The screen glowed in the dark car. A new text message from Mom. It popped up on the lock screen. I didn't need to open it to read it. "What was all that talk about Rainier City? Your father and I are very confused. Call me when you get this." Confused. 4 weeks after I had announced it to their faces, 4 weeks after I had sent a clear, concise text message that all 3 of them had read, I looked at the message, its blue light illuminating the car's interior. I saw the 3 blue ticks in my memory. Read by Mom, read by Dad, read by Brielle. They weren't confused. They were inconvenienced, and they had finally realized their inconvenience wasn't going to fix itself. I did not call her. I didn't even touch the phone. I just kept driving. I let the message glow on the passenger seat until the screen timed out and went dark again, leaving me alone with the hum of the engine and the voice of the GPS. I arrived in Rainier City 22 hours after I'd left Lakeview. I was exhausted, dehydrated, and my back felt like it was made of concrete. But I was also, for the first time in my life, completely, thrillingly free. The temporary apartment was exactly as Arcadia had promised: clean, small, and filled with light. It was in a modern high-rise building, a block away from my new office. It had nothing in it but a new bed, a small sofa, and a starter kit of kitchen supplies, all provided by the relocation company. It was perfect. It was a blank slate. My moving truck arrived the next day. I spent 48 hours unpacking, driven by a manic energy. I set up my new kitchen. I organized my new, much larger closet. I hung my own art on the walls. Then, on Monday, I walked the 1 block to the Arcadia MedTech Rainier City headquarters. The first week was a whirlwind. It was like drinking from a fire hose, but I loved it. I was introduced to new software platforms, new FDA regulatory standards for the devices we were testing, new team members, my new boss, a sharp, efficient woman named Dr. Eris, walked me through the pipeline. "Martin, glad to have you. she said, shaking my hand firmly. Your record in Lakeview was impressive. We're throwing you in the deep end on the new cardiopulmonary trial. Your data integrity protocols are going to be the backbone of this launch. I sat in meetings. I contributed ideas. My opinions were noted. My questions were answered respectfully. When I spoke, people listened. Nobody interrupted me to ask for a snack. Nobody handed me their plate. These people, my new colleagues, had no idea that a helper version of Claire Martin even existed. They had never seen me pack a shipping box or cut chicken into tiny pieces. They only knew Ms. Martin, the senior clinical specialist whose expertise was critical to their project. I felt my value being mirrored back at me in every professional, respectful email, in every complex problem my team trusted me to solve. It was a dizzying, addictive feeling. I was no longer defined by the orders barked at me in a kitchen. I was being defined by the value of my mind. At the end of the second week, I went back to my apartment, made myself a simple dinner, and sat on my new sofa. I had been in Rainier City for 15 days. My phone, still set to Do Not Disturb for everyone in the circle, was silent. They hadn't tried to call again. Not Mom, not Dad, not Brielle. Apparently, their confusion hadn't been strong enough to warrant a follow-up. I was fine with that. The silence was clean. It was peace. Then, on a Tuesday, exactly 1 month, almost to the day, after I had left Lakeview, an envelope arrived in my new mailbox. It was a thick, cream-colored card, forwarded from my old address. My fingers hesitated. It was my mother's handwriting. I opened it. It wasn't a letter. It was an invitation. A pre-printed, store-bought invitation for my Aunt Elise's 60th birthday party. Join us to celebrate Elise's big 6-0. It was being held at my parents' house, and at the bottom, in my mother's familiar, looping cursive, was a handwritten note, Claire, please be here by 1 p.m. to help with the setup like usual. And can you pick up the balloon order? I stared at the card. I read the note again, like usual. I looked at the date of the party. It was this coming Saturday. I walked over to my laptop and pulled up a map. The driving distance from Rainier City, Washington, to Lakeview, Illinois, was 1,984 miles, a 30-hour drive. They had forgotten. It wasn't malice. It was something so much worse. It was a complete and total blind spot. In their minds, I still lived 30 minutes away. In their minds, my function balloon getter, table setter, last-minute helper was so ingrained that it completely overrode the reality of my new life, the reality I had told them about. I laughed. It was a strange, rusty sound in my quiet apartment. I pinned the invitation to the new corkboard in my kitchen, a little reminder of what I had escaped. I did not, of course, go. I did not text them. I did not correct them. I just didn't. On the Saturday of the party, I went for a hike. I explored the trails around the base of the mountain, breathing in the cold, clean air. It was beautiful. When I got back to my car, around 4 p.m., I unmuted my phone. It was as if a dam had broken. 14 missed calls. From Mom, from Dad, from Brielle. A string of texts, each one more frantic than the last. Mom. 1 to 15 p.m. Claire, where are you? The balloon order is still at the shop. Mom. 1:45 p.m. This isn't funny. Elise is here. Call me. Dad. 2:10 p.m. Your mother is flustered. You were supposed to be here. Brielle. 2:30 p.m. Seriously. Claire, Mom is having a meltdown about the catering and I can't find the good serving platters. Where did you put them last time, Mom? 3:00 p.m. Claire Martin, I am deeply, deeply disappointed in you. You have ruined your aunt's party. My hands were steady. I was not angry. I was not upset. I just felt a cold. Final clarity. I hit the call button for my mother. She picked up on the first ring, her voice a sharp, hissing, Claire. Hi, Mom, I said calmly. I see you're trying to reach me. Where are you? She shrieked. I could hear the party noise in the background music. People talking. The party started 2 hours ago. You abandoned me. Your aunt is so upset. Mom, I said, my voice patient, the way I would speak to a difficult test subject. I couldn't make it to the party. I am in Rainier City. I live here now. What are you talking about? She snapped. You're just in Lakeview. No, I said, and the word felt powerful. I'm not. I moved. I've been living in a different state for an entire month. I told you this. I texted you. I stood in your living room and said the words, I am moving to Rainier City. Another pause. This one was different. It was the sound of a mental filing cabinet being frantically searched. I don't remember seeing that. She finally stammered. A lie. A weak, pathetic, transparent lie. The 3 blue ticks flashed in my mind like neon signs. You read the message, Mom, I said, still calm. But that's not important. I'm just calling back to let you know I'm safe. I have to go. Wait, she yelled. The panic in her voice shifting, changing. The anger was gone, replaced by a new, sudden, horrifyingly familiar focus. The sound of a shark smelling blood in the water. Wait, Rainier City? Arcadia. You got that bonus, right? The relocation bonus. I froze. Brielle was just telling us, she continued, her voice dropping into its conspiratorial, managing tone. She needs some expansion capital, just a little bridge loan to get her boutique off the ground. Finally, you know how hard she's working. With that big bonus, you wouldn't even miss it. 5 or 10,000, just to help your sister. I looked up at the mountain, its peak covered in snow, permanent and unmoving, exhausted from being used. That was the name for this feeling. This bottomless, hollowed out, sucking void of their need. A need that had crossed 1,000 miles to find me. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not argue. I pressed the red end call button on my screen. I opened my car door, sat down, and turned the key in the ignition. When I got back to my apartment, I walked over to the sleek, modern desk where I now worked from home. I opened the bottom drawer, a drawer I had designated for miscellaneous office supplies. I placed my phone inside it, on top of a box of paper clips and a staple remover. Then I slid the drawer shut, closing it on the noise, the demands, and the bottomless, gaping need of the circle. I went into my new kitchen and started, for the first time, to cook a meal just for myself. I left my phone in that desk drawer for the entire weekend. When I finally retrieved it, I saw the predictable missed calls and angry texts had tapered off into silence. I held the phone in my hand, this small black rectangle that had become a conduit for their demands. I opened my group chats. I found the circle. My thumb hovered over the block button. No, that felt too dramatic. Too Brielle. Instead, I simply pressed leave group and delete chat. I did not block their numbers. I did not make a grand announcement. I just left the conversation. The silence that followed was vast, clean, and entirely mine. The next 2 years were not a passive passage of time. They were an active, deliberate reconstruction of my life, built brick by brick in the quiet I had finally claimed at Arcadia. I poured my energy into my work, not as an escape, as I might have done in Lakeview, but as an investment in myself. The deep end Dr. Aris had tossed me into became my new environment. I wasn't just treading water. I was swimming. I learned the new systems. I mastered the new protocols, and I started identifying inefficiencies. I rewrote the data verification protocol for the cardiopulmonary trial, implementing a new double-blind check that cut our audit queries by 30%. My work got noticed. I was respected. 18 months after I arrived, I was promoted to lead clinical specialist. 6 months after that, following the successful FDA approval of 2 devices I had overseen, I was offered the position of regional manager. My income doubled. I don't think I even processed it at first. The numbers on the offer letter seemed abstract, like they belonged to someone else. It was only when my first new paycheck hit my account that I truly understood. I had, entirely on my own, created a life of stability and, yes, prosperity. The temporary corporate apartment was fine, but it was not a home. With my new salary, I stopped renting, I went to a bank, got pre-approved for a mortgage that made my hands shake, and I started hunting. I found it in Alder Row. It was a neighborhood I had fallen in love with, full of old brick buildings, mature trees, and small, independent bookstores and coffee shops. The building itself was a modern conversion of an old warehouse, with high ceilings and huge windows. The unit was a 2-bedroom on the corner. The realtor kept pointing out the potential for a home office or a nursery. I didn't care about that. I cared about the balcony. It faced east, looking out over the city and straight toward the mountain. Every morning, the sunrise would hit the snow-capped peak, and it was a private, daily miracle. I bought it. I signed the papers. Claire Martin, became a homeowner. And my kitchen, my God, my kitchen. It was my sanctuary. It had dark soapstone countertops, warm walnut cabinets, and professional-grade appliances. It became my stage, the place where I performed for an audience of one. I invested in heavy black cast-iron pans. I bought a set of German knives that felt perfectly weighted in my hand. I bought a Dutch oven the color of a deep blue sea. I cooked elaborate, complex, multi-day meals. I baked sourdough bread that required feeding a starter and days of patient proofing. I roasted whole fish. I perfected my risotto. I did it all for the sheer, sensual joy of creation, of process. In this kitchen, no one stood behind me tapping their foot. No one complained that the food was taking too long, and no one, ever, told me to cut the chicken into smaller pieces. The new apartment was quiet. It was a beautiful, peaceful, adult silence. But it needed a heartbeat. I went to the Rainier City shelter. Just to look. An hour later, I was signing adoption papers for a miniature schnauzer. He was all wiry gray fur, bristly eyebrows, and an outrageously oversized personality for such a small body. I named him Pip. Pip immediately took over the apartment. He scattered his toys with joyous abandon. He claimed the best spot on the sofa. He didn't care about my job title. He didn't care about my family history. He just cared that I was home at 6 p.m. sharp for his dinner. He made the silence feel warm instead of just empty. Pip was also the reason I met Evan. It was at the sprawling dog park near Alder Row. Pip, in a typical show of unearned bravado, was trying to herd a golden retriever at least 3 times his size. I ran over, mortified, to apologize to the owner. The owner just laughed. He had a kind, open face and eyes that crinkled at the corners. "It's fine," he said. "He's got grit. I like that." That was Evan Mercer. He was 33, he had the patient golden retriever, and he had that easy, calm confidence of someone who is genuinely passionate about what they do. We started talking. He was, it turned out, the founder of a local tech startup. "Kinetic Bridge," he said, tossing a ball for his dog. "We design wearable devices for physical rehabilitation. We're trying to gamify the recovery process for stroke and sports injury patients." My world was clinical trials. His was applied rehab tech. We were 2 sides of the same coin. He asked me out for coffee. "Just to talk shop," he said. "I'd love to pick your brain about the validation process." The shop talk at the coffee shop bled into a walk through the park. The walk turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a series of long evenings, walking Pip and his dog, Buster, under the yellow, old-fashioned streetlights of Alder Row. He'd talk about the struggles of his latest funding round. I'd talk about the frustrations of navigating FDA protocols. He listened. He asked intelligent questions. He remembered the names of my colleagues. He never once asked me for anything other than my time and my opinion. It was, I realized, the first relationship I'd ever had, romantic or otherwise, that was based on mutual respect, not on mutual obligation. During these 2 years, my new life became my only life. The old one faded. I had no contact with my family. I didn't call them on Christmas. I didn't get a call on my birthday. It was a perfect, clean, unbroken silence. I had stepped out of their orbit, and without my energy to fuel their needs, the connection simply dissolved. This new, hard-won strength bled into every part of my world. When Arcadia's regional leadership changed, and my new director proposed I temporarily absorb the management of 2 additional states, Oregon and Idaho, without a change in title or compensation, the old Claire would have buckled. The old Claire would have said yes, worked herself to the bone, sacrificed her weekends, and done it all just to be seen as helpful. I looked at my new director in his office. I said, "No." He was stunned. "To be clear," I continued, my voice steady, "I cannot take on that scope without a formal title review, a compensation adjustment, and a resource reallocation for 2 new data auditors. Here is the data on my current team's workload. As you can see, we are at 110% capacity." The old Claire would have been terrified. I just felt calm. I was stating a fact. I was presenting my data. I was holding a boundary. They did not give me the extra states. They hired a separate manager for that territory. And my director, I noted, treated me with a new, sharp level of respect. Learning to say no and backing it up with data felt almost as good as the promotion. The silence from Lakeview was broken only once, and it was by the only person I wasn't surprised to hear from my Aunt Elise. She was my mother's younger sister, always the slightly eccentric, artsy one in the family. She was the one who had always sent me a $20 bill and a birthday card, even when I was 28. We had exchanged polite, infrequent texts over the 2 years. "How are you enjoying the new city?" "I love it, Aunt Elise. It's beautiful here." Last month, she sent me a text. "Claire Bear, I'm finally doing my big West Coast road trip. I'll be passing through Rainier City next week. Could I take my favorite niece out to lunch?" I was genuinely happy to hear from her. I said yes. Immediately, she arrived at my condo building, and I met her in the lobby. She looked around, her eyes wide. "My goodness, Claire, this is fancy." When we got up to my unit and she walked inside, her jaw dropped. "Claire," she breathed, walking over to the big windows. This is a palace. You did this?" She loved everything. She loved the art I'd collected from local markets. She loved my bookshelf. She loved Pip. She stood in my living room as the afternoon sun streamed in, lighting up the whole space and hitting the mountain in the distance. "Oh, the light," she gushed, pulling out her phone. "The light in here is just magical. My little house in Lakeview is like a cave. Do you mind if I take a picture? I need this for inspiration." I laughed. How could I say no? It was my aunt. It was a picture of a room. Of course, Aunt Elise, be my guest. She snapped a few photos of the living room, cooing over the view. We went to a long, wonderful lunch. We talked about her trip. We talked about my work. We talked about Evan. We did not talk about my mother or Brielle. It was perfect. I hugged her goodbye, and she drove off toward the coast. I thought nothing of it. That was my mistake. I had forgotten how the circle worked. I had forgotten that in my family, all information is currency. That evening, my phone, usually so quiet, lit up. It was a notification from Facebook. Aunt Elise had posted a photo and tagged me. It was the photo of my living room. The light was, as she'd said, beautiful. It streamed across my dark green velvet sofa, my overflowing bookshelf, and the corner of my balcony, with the snow-capped peak visible and majestic in the background. The caption was innocent, sweet. "So proud of my amazing niece, Claire Martin. Her new place in Rainier City is absolutely stunning. Such a sophisticated eye. Proud Aunt Rainier City." Within an hour, the comments started, and they weren't from her friends. They were from my family. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "Wow, what neighborhood is that?" An uncle. "Is that a doorman building? Must be expensive." Another cousin. "Are you renting or did you buy that view?" And then, the comment that made my blood run cold. My mother. "We are just bursting with pride, so proud of our Claire. She's doing amazing things out west. Our Claire, 2 years. 2 full years of absolute, unbroken silence. Not a single text message on my 30th birthday. Not a Merry Christmas. Not an, "Are you okay?" during those wildfires we saw on the news. But now, presented with photographic evidence of a high-end condominium, I was suddenly, miraculously, Our Claire, again. I belong to them. My phone buzzed again. It wasn't a public comment. It was a private message. From Aunt Elise. It wasn't text. It was a screenshot. She must have felt guilty. She had screenshotted the original family group chat, The Circle, the one I had left 2 years ago. I zoomed in. The text was sharp and clear. Brielle. Mom, did you see that? Where did she get the money for a place like that? Dad. That looks very expensive. Mom. I'm not sure. That bonus must have been much bigger than we thought. Brielle, didn't you say she was a regional manager now? She must be making a fortune. Brielle. She's sitting on a pile of cash while her own sister is struggling to keep her business alive. Unbelievable. Some people have no loyalty. Mom. Now, we don't know the whole story. We just need to understand the situation. Find out the details. I stared at the screenshot until the pixels blurred. They weren't proud. They were calculating. They were assessing an asset. They were running my net worth. The 2 years of peace hadn't been peace. It had just been an intermission. Aunt Elise's innocent photo wasn't an atta girl. It was a dinner bell. And I knew, with a certainty that settled like ice in my stomach, that they were very, very hungry. The screenshot from Aunt Elise's phone was a warning siren. 2 days later, the invasion was announced. My phone buzzed on my desk. It was a text from a number I didn't have saved, but I knew who it was. My mother. She had a new number. Hi, Claire. Your father, Brielle, the girls, and I have all booked our tickets. We land tomorrow at noon. Send your address. It was not a request. It was not, "Can we please come visit and talk?" It was a statement of logistics, an appropriation of my time and my space, announced as a fait accompli from over 1,000 miles away. They had already bought the tickets. They were already on their way. My hands went cold. I stared at the message. Send your address. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it. I was sitting in my living room with Evan. We were drinking tea, and Pip was asleep on his foot. He saw the color drain from my face. What is it, Claire? I read the text message aloud. My voice was flat, robotic. Evan was silent for a moment. He was a good man. His first instinct was to protect. Well, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I'm staying. I'll be right here. We can tell them, together, that it's not a good time. I looked at him, at his kind, supportive face, and I appreciated it. I truly did. But this wasn't his fight. This was the final exam for the last 2 years of my life. This was the practical application of everything I had learned. No, I said, putting my mug down. I need you to go. I need you to not be here. He looked hurt. Claire, I want to help. I know, I said, touching his hand. And the best way you can help is by letting me do this myself. This is my final audit. I have to prove to myself that I can hold the boundaries I've built. They can't use you as a scapegoat. They can't pivot and make this about you. This is about me. He nodded slowly. He understood. He saw the steel in my spine that hadn't been there 2 years ago. Okay, he said, but you call me. The second you need me, I'm here. I will, I lied. I knew I wouldn't. After he left, I looked around my beautiful, peaceful apartment, my sanctuary. It felt like I was battening down the hatches before a hurricane. I began to prepare, but I wasn't preparing for guests. I was preparing for a siege. I went through the living room, the small, delicate glass sculpture Evan had given me for my 30th birthday, a swirling, abstract representation of the mountain. I took it from the shelf and wrapped it in bubble wrap. I placed it in my sock drawer, in the back, under my sweaters. I went to my bookshelf. The leather-bound first edition of a medical textbook I cherished, gone. I hid it, my framed diplomas, the physical proof of my credentials. I took them off the wall of my office and slid them under the bed. I was removing every piece of myself, every piece of my success. From their view, I was creating a sterile environment. I took the dog bowls from the kitchen floor. I took Pip's favorite squeaky toys and put them in a bin. I set up my spare bedroom, the one I used as my office, as a self-contained unit for Pip. I put his bed in there, his water, a new bone. He looked at me, confused, as I shut the door. But I knew the chaos of my nieces, now 8 and 6, would terrify him. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I just lay there, in the dark, listening to the hum of my building, feeling like I was waiting for a diagnosis. The next day, I did not go to the airport. I did not text them, "Welcome to Rainier City." I did not, as the message had demanded. Send my address. They had my aunt's screenshot. They knew my building. I knew they would find it. At 12:30, my intercom buzzed, a harsh, jagged sound that ripped through the quiet. "Yes," I said into the speaker. "Claire, it's us. We're here. You need to let the cab driver into the garage." My mother's voice, high and impatient. I did not let the cab driver in. "The building doesn't allow that. You can come up through the lobby." I heard her huff. "Well, fine. Buzz us in." I pressed the button. I stood by my front door. I took one deep, grounding breath. I was not the helper. I was not the coordinator. I was the homeowner. I heard the elevator ding down the hall. I heard the rumble of rolling luggage. I heard my niece's high-pitched, echoing voices. "Is this it? Is it this one?" Then they were at my door. I opened it. Just as my mother's hand was raised to knock, she was the first one in. She didn't say hello. She just launched herself at me, pulling me into an embrace that wasn't warm. It was possessive. It was a clamp. "Claire, you are impossible to find." Her perfume, the same overpowering floral I'd smelled my whole life, filled my lungs. My father was next. "Hey, kiddo." He was holding a white bakery box, which he thrust at me. "Your mother said to get your favorite sour cream coffee cake." I took the box. It felt heavy. I like honey oat. I hate sour cream. I have hated sour cream since I was 5. They had been buying this for me for 29 years, and in 29 years, I had never once eaten it. It was the perfect, damning symbol of their entire relationship with me. They didn't know me. They just knew the idea of me, the one they had invented. Then came Brielle, last, as always. She was, of course, on her phone, one finger in her ear, talking loudly as she rolled her massive suitcase over my threshold. "No, I told you. The invoice is in the system. You just need to look." And finally, the chaos. Ava and Mia, 8 and 6, they were bigger, louder, and holding their own iPads. They exploded into the apartment, not like guests, but like a demolition crew. "Wow, this is small," Ava announced. "Where's the TV?" Mia demanded, running past me into the living room. Before I could say a word, Mia had her hands on the tall, ceramic vase in the corner. She was shaking it. "What's in here? Is it candy?" "Mia." "Put that down. Now," I said. My voice wasn't a shriek. It wasn't my mother's panic. It was my regional manager voice, the one I used for non-compliance. She froze, startled. "They're just playing, Claire." "Relax," Brielle said, not even looking up from her phone as she finally ended her call. She tossed her jacket onto my cream-colored sofa. "In my house, we don't shake the vases," I said, looking directly at my nieces. "And we don't open cabinets." Ava, who had been halfway through opening my kitchen pantry, pulled her hand back as if burned. "Geez, okay," Brielle muttered, rolling her eyes. "Funhouse." I ignored her. I walked over to my bookshelf, the one I hadn't been able to empty completely, and pulled off 2 books I had bought yesterday in preparation. They were age-appropriate graphic novels. I bent down to my nieces. "You can't run in here, but you can sit on the sofa and you can each read one of these. They're brand new. I haven't even read them yet." Their eyes, so used to screens, actually lit up with interest. They took the books, climbed onto the sofa, and, miraculously, were quiet. I had redirected them, not with a threat, not with a yell, but with an actual, structured alternative. My mother, who was watching this interaction, looked baffled. "Well," she said, her public relations smile snapping back into place as she began her own interrogation. She glided through my living room, her fingers brushing over the countertop, over the fabric of my chairs, a tactile, appraising violation. "This is very nice, dear. A little much for a single person, isn't it? All this space, just for you." "I like the space," I said, standing by the kitchen island, not moving. I did not offer them drinks. I did not offer to take their coats. I was not a hostess. I was a checkpoint. Brielle, having found the Wi-Fi password without asking, settled into my best armchair as if she owned it. "So," she said, her eyes scanning, "what was the down payment on a place like this? Must have been insane. What's your interest rate? I bet it's not even fixed. What are the HOA fees? They get you on the fees in these buildings." They hadn't even been there for 5 minutes. Not 5 minutes. And we were already at the financial audit. I looked at the four of them. My mother, perched on the edge of my sofa, a fake smile plastered on her face. My father, standing awkwardly by the window, already disengaged, looking at the mountain as if it were a television. Brielle, in my chair, her feet on my rug, phone in hand, and the two children, who were, for the moment, the only innocent parties in the room. The old Claire would have folded. She would have been flustered, embarrassed by the questions. She would have mumbled, "It's fine," and "I'm managing," and "Oh, let me get you some coffee." But the old Claire was gone. She had been packed in a box in Lakeview and had never arrived in Rainier City. I sat down on the bar stool opposite them. I folded my hands on the cool soapstone countertop. I looked directly at my mother, then at Brielle. "Why are you really here?" The question, so direct, so un-Claire-like, hung in the air, sucking the fake pleasantries out of the room. My mother's smile faltered. She looked at Brielle. Brielle looked back at her. This was the moment. The script had been flipped, but they were still going to perform. My mother took a deep breath, recalibrating, shifting from proud visiting mom to concerned, loving matriarch. She leaned forward, her voice dropping into that fake sympathetic tone I knew so well, the one she used right before she moved in for the kill. "Claire, honey," she began, we're just so worried about Brielle." Ah, there it was. "She's been working so hard," my mother continued, as Brielle, on cue, looked down at her lap, her expression carefully crafted to look like tragic, weary martyrdom. That little offline boutique, it was her dream. She poured her soul into it. "It failed," Brielle said, her voice a dramatic, low monotone. "The overhead, the foot traffic, the pandemic, it all just collapsed. She's in a bit of trouble, honey," my mother said, her voice now a whisper. "We're in trouble. We didn't want to bother you, but how much?" I asked, my voice still flat. Brielle looked up, her eyes hard. "It doesn't matter. You wouldn't understand. Try me," I said. My mother answered for her. It's $46,800. The number hit me. The last rumor I'd heard, it was 30,000. 46,800. I repeated, the words feeling foreign. "The penalties," Brielle snapped. "The lease-breaking clause, it's predatory." My father finally spoke, turning from the window. His voice was heavy. "We tried to help, Claire. We really did. We've pulled nearly everything from our retirement fund to keep her afloat these past 2 years." My mother nodded, her eyes filling with performative tears. "We're tapped out, honey. We have nothing left. We could lose the house." The silence in the room was thick, the weight of their combined financial ruin, their poor planning, their codependence, their absolute refusal to let Brielle ever face a single consequence on her own. It all just settled on my countertops, next to the sour cream coffee cake I would never eat. And then, my mother, the great coordinator, delivered the solution. "Claire," she said, leaning in, her eyes bright, as if she had just had the most brilliant idea in the world. "We talked about it, and there is a way for everyone to win, a way for you to help, to save this family. It's so logical." I just stared at her. "This apartment," she said, gesturing around her, "a game show hostess presenting the grand prize. It's beautiful. It's a prime asset. And in this market, it would sell in a day, for a huge profit." I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. "You sell this place," she continued, her words tumbling out faster, the plan now fully revealed. "You clear? What, 100,000 more you give Brielle the 46.8 she needs to clear her debt. You give us back what we loaned her so we can save our retirement. And you—" She paused, smiling, as if delivering the best part. "You can just go move in with that lovely new boyfriend of yours Evan Aunt Elise said he's a founder. He must have a nice place. It's perfect. You're with him all the time anyway. It's the logical next step. You'd save on rent." She finished, beaming, triumphant. The solution was on the table. Sell my home, the home I had earned, the home I had paid for. Sell my sanctuary. Give the profits to my sister for her failed dream. Give the rest to my parents to fix the mess they made by enabling her, and I, having liquidated my entire life and my single greatest asset, should just go move in with my boyfriend. I looked at them, all of them. My father, nodding in agreement. Family is supposed to help each other. Claire. My sister, Brielle, looking at me with a cold, entitled hunger. My mother, smiling, expectant, waiting for me to applaud her brilliant, selfless plan. And I did something I had not done in years. I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a short, sharp bark of pure, unadulterated disbelief. It was the sound of a data point so anomalous, so utterly, comically absurd, that it broke the entire system. It was the laugh of a woman who had finally seen the complete, unedited, terrifying blueprint of her family's dysfunction, and they had just handed it to me, tied with a bow, on a silver platter. The laugh echoed in the quiet room. It was a raw, sharp, unfamiliar sound, and it stopped my mother mid-beam, her smile freezing and cracking like thin ice. "What?" she said, her voice faltering. "What's so funny?" Brielle's face, which had been set in a mask of entitled expectation, darkened. "What is wrong with you?" I stood up from the bar stool. The short, hysterical laugh had passed, leaving a cold, absolute calm in its place. I felt as if I'd just stepped out of a fog I'd been living in for 29 years. Let's do an audit," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. My father, still by the window, turned. "An audit? What are you talking about?" "A relationship audit," I said, looking directly at my mother. "You're all here proposing a logical financial transaction based on family helping family. So, let's look at the ledger. Let's review the accounts." I began to walk the perimeter of my living room, not in panic, but in a slow, deliberate circle, like a lawyer preparing for a closing argument. "Fact," I began, holding up one finger. 2 years and, let's see, 4 months ago, I sat in your living room, on your beige sofa, and I announced I had been promoted. I announced I was moving to Rainier City. I stopped and looked at them. "Do you remember what happened?" My mother just stared, her mouth slightly open. "I remember," I continued. No one looked up. Dad was watching the pregame. "Brielle, you were in the middle of a live stream about a chiffon dress. My entire life-changing announcement was swallowed by a football game and a KPI analysis for your online store." "That's not," my mother started. Fact, I said, cutting her off, my voice still level. I sent a follow-up text. In the circle. I confirmed the move. I gave the date. I watched, on my phone, as 3 little blue check marks appeared. Read by Mom. Read by Dad. Read by Brielle. And then, I said, turning to my mother, the next day, you asked me to come over and cut up chicken for my nieces because Brielle was working and I wasn't busy because I don't have kids. This is not fair, Claire, my father said, his voice taking on that weak, blustering tone he used when he was uncomfortable. I'm not finished with the audit, Dad, I said. Let's review the 2 Christmases prior to my move. They weren't holidays. They were mandatory, unpaid, 96-hour packing shifts in Brielle's garage. I remember the last one distinctly. I had so many paper cuts from the cardboard boxes that my knuckles were bleeding. My hands were raw. Brielle scoffed. Oh, please, you're so dramatic. I am, I turned to her. What about my vacation? The 1 week of paid time off I had scheduled for the first time in 3 years, the trip I'd saved for, to go to the coast. Do you remember that? Brielle, you had a last-minute, vital fashion sourcing trip to Las Vegas, and I spent 168 hours, the entirety of my vacation, in your house, watching your children, so you could go to clubs and network. They were my kids, Brielle shouted. You're their aunt. And you are their mother, I shouted back, and the sudden volume of my own voice surprised even me. The girls on the sofa flinched, and I immediately lowered my tone, my anger cooling back into ice. Let's move on to the last 2 years, I said, looking back at my mother. 2 years of silence, my 30th birthday, my 31st birthday, not a text, not a card, not a single call. I was just gone, an erased line item, until Aunt Elise posted a picture of a physical asset, and suddenly, you were bursting with pride for our Claire. I stopped in front of my mother. She was trembling, but not with sadness. It was rage. Family, she said, her voice low and shaking, is supposed to help each other. Claire, that's what families do. I did, I said. That's the entire point. I did. I was the help. I was the unpaid intern, the uncredited packer, the on-call babysitter, and the in-house chef for this entire family for my whole adult life. I helped. I helped until I was empty. I helped until my hands bled. I helped until I had to move 1,000 miles away just to be able to hear myself think. I looked at the sour cream coffee cake, still sitting on my counter, the perfect, rotten symbol. You don't even know what I like, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You've brought me that cake every birthday for 2 decades. I am allergic to sour cream. I've been allergic since I was 5. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Brielle looked stunned. My father just looked down at his feet. You don't know me, I said. You know my function, and that function is now retired. I walked to my front door. I grabbed the sleek, cold, metal handle. I turned it and pulled the door open. The bright, neutral light of the hallway flooded the entryway. This visit is over, I said. My mother gasped, a sharp, theatrical sound. You're kicking us out. I am stating a fact, I said. This visit, which I did not agree to, is over. You were not invited. You did not ask if you could come. You bought tickets. You flew across the country, and you showed up on my doorstep with a financial plan to liquidate my life. That is not a visit. That is an invasion, and it is over. My father finally found his voice, a deep, wounded baritone. We came all this way. Claire, we flew for hours. You're just going to throw your family out into the hallway, after 2 years. I am not throwing you out, I said, holding the door open. I am enforcing a boundary. I require that the people in my life respect my home, my time, and my schedule. You did none of those things. Your travel arrangements are your responsibility, not mine. Brielle, finally, surged out of the armchair, Her face was red and splotchy. "This is unbelievable. You've become so cold, so mean. I'm your sister." I looked her dead in the eye. "Then I suggest you start acting like my sister, and not like my primary, chronic financial liability." Her jaw dropped. "We're leaving," my father announced, as if it was his decision. "Get your things. Get the girls." Ava and Mia, who had been silent witnesses to the entire thing, looked terrified. They were still clutching the graphic novels I had given them. Brielle, in a final, petty act of cruelty, marched over to the sofa. "Give me those," she snapped, and she physically ripped the book from Ava's hands. "You don't get to keep presents from a person who hates us." Ava's face crumpled. A tear rolled down her cheek, and that was the one thing that broke through my ice. "Stop," I said, and my voice was the voice of the regional manager who had just found a critical data breach. It was absolute. Brielle froze, her hand in the air. I walked over, past her, and knelt in front of my nieces. I ignored my sister completely. "Hey," I said gently, my voice suddenly soft. The girls looked at me, their eyes wide and wet. "You can keep those. They're yours. I bought them for you." I gently took the book back from Brielle's slackened grip and handed it back to Ava. "You can read them on the plane." "We are not," Brielle began. "You will let them keep the books," I said, standing up and looking at her. "They are children. This is not their fault. Your behavior is not their fault. Now, take your things and leave my home." My father grabbed their roller bags. My mother, her face a mask of pure vindictive fury, grabbed her purse and didn't look at me. Brielle herded the children out into the hall. They stood there, a miserable, defeated little unit, under the fluorescent lights of the hallway. My mother looked at me one last time. "You will regret this, Claire. You will be all alone here, in your ex-Auchy apartment, and you will have no one." "I'm not alone, Mom," I said, my voice just tired. "I'm just protected." I closed the door. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the loudest, most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I leaned my forehead against the cool, solid wood of the door. I heard the muffled sounds of their recriminations in the hallway. I heard the elevator ding. Then, silence. The apartment was still. A moment later, I heard a soft snuffle from the bedroom. The door I had closed creaked open. Just a crack. Pip's little black nose appeared. Then his whole wiry head. He trotted out, looked up at me by the door, and let out a soft whine, as if asking, "Is the storm over?" I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor. He ran over and jumped into my lap, licking the tears I hadn't realized were falling. I sat there for 5 minutes. Then, my phone, which had been on the counter, began to vibrate. It didn't stop. It was a constant, furious blizzard of notifications. I picked it up, a string of texts from my mother. "How could you do this to us? Your father is devastated." "You have broken my heart," a text from my father. "You were cruel today." "Claire," a text from Brielle. "You are a selfish bitch. I hope you're happy." Then, more from Mom. "You are no longer a part of this family. After all we did for you, I am disowning you. Don't you dare try to call us." The apologies were mixed with the blame, the guilt laced with the rage. It was the all-too-familiar, toxic cocktail of my childhood. I silenced the notifications. An hour later, an email arrived. It was from Brielle. The subject line was, "What you have done." It was long. It was an epic. It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, a manifesto of her victimhood. It detailed, in painstaking, self-pitying prose, how her entire life had been a struggle, how my easy-lucky success was unearned, how my refusal to liquidate my assets for her was the direct, proximate cause of all her problems. It ended with the pièce de résistance. "If you don't sell that apartment and give us the money, you will be personally responsible for Mom and Dad losing their house. Their ruin will be on your hands. I hope you can sleep at night knowing you did this to your own parents." I read the email twice. I felt no anger. I felt no guilt. I just felt a profound sense of confirmation. I stood up. I walked over to my desk. I hit print. I watched as the 4 pages of her email spooled out of my printer. I picked them up. They were still warm. I 3-hole punched them. I went to my office supply cabinet and pulled out a new, empty, 1-inch binder. I clipped the email inside. It was the first document. I took a label maker and printed a small, neat, clinical label for the spine. It read, "Evidence." I did not reply to the texts. I did not reply to the email. I did not engage. I did not go on social media to defend myself. I chose, instead, a deliberate, powerful silence. I had given them my data. The audit was complete. The text stopped after 3 days. The silence from Lakeview was, once again, absolute. Months passed. The binder remained on my shelf. A thin, solitary reminder. Winter turned to spring in Rainier City. I went to work. Evan and I took a trip to the coast. Pip learned a new trick. My life, the one I had built, continued. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The number was blocked. But I answered it. "Hello?" A long pause. Then, a voice I barely recognized. It was my mother. But all the sharp, managerial edges were gone. She sounded small. "Claire," she whispered. I said nothing. "Claire, honey, I'm sorry." Her voice broke, a real, ragged, non-performative sob. I was so wrong. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I miss my daughter. I just want to talk to my daughter. When you're ready." I listened. I heard the apology. I registered it. "I appreciate you saying that, Mom," I said, and my voice was kind. But it was not warm. It was not forgiving. It was just neutral. "I really do. So can we." "I need more time," I said. "I need a lot more time." I hung up the phone. I had enforced the boundary. Now, I had to enforce the space. The fallout from Aunt Elise's photo was not, as I had hoped, a contained fire. It was an aerosol spray of my personal information. My social media inboxes, which I rarely checked, began to fill up with filtered messages from people I didn't know. "Hi, I saw a picture of your gorgeous condo in Alder Row. Is it for rent? My husband and I are looking to buy in your building. Are you considering a private sale? What's the HOA fee on a 2-bedroom unit there?" It was disorienting. My home, my private sanctuary, was suddenly being treated like a public listing on Zillow. The digital noise turned into a real-world problem a week later. I received a formal, flagged email from the manager of the Alder Row HOA. It was a security notification. "Dear Ms. Martin," it began, "we are writing to inform you of a minor security incident yesterday afternoon. An individual, who did not provide identification, approached the front desk concierge asking to be led up to see Claire's unit. He stated he had seen the apartment on social media and wanted to inquire about a quick sale. Our staff, per protocol, denied him access and informed him this is a private, residence-only building. We recommend you double-check your security settings and be aware of what is posted online." My stomach clenched. This was a direct consequence of that photo. That innocent, proud aunt picture had become bait. I did not panic. I did what I do at work when I find a critical data breach. I initiated a containment protocol. I went down to the lobby and spoke with the head of security. I gave them a new, extremely short written guest list. It had 4 names on it, Evan, Aunt Elise, and 2 of my closest friends in the city. "No one else gets in," I stated, my voice firm. "I don't care if they say they are my family. I don't care if they say they are my long-lost cousin. If their name is not on this list, you do not call up. You do not let them in the lobby. You will tell them. We cannot confirm that resident lives here. Is that clear?" The security manager, a former military man, nodded, a look of new respect on his face. "Crystal clear. Ms. Martin, we will consider this a standing order." I went back up to my apartment. I changed the electronic code on my door. I enabled the two-factor authentication log on my smart lock, which would now send me a picture of anyone who even touched the keypad. I was building a firewall. While I was securing my physical space, Brielle, as expected, was launching a public relations war. The screenshots started arriving from my old friends in Lakeview. It was Brielle's new, featured Facebook post. It was, of course, not direct. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive, manipulative, vague booking. The post read, "It's so hard to keep your head up when you are drowning. You pour your heart and your last dime into your dream, and you just pray for a life raft. But some people are sitting on the deck of their own private yacht, watching you go under, and they won't even throw you a rope. I guess family is just a word. So disappointed in the people I thought I could count on. Pray for me." It was disgusting. It was a lie. And it was, I had to admit, brilliant. She had cast herself as the tragic heroine, and me as the cold, rich, heartless villain, all without ever using my name. My friends texted, "This is about you, right? This is insane." I typed out a single reply to all of them. "It's a long story. I'm not engaging." I did not respond on her post. I did not defend myself. I did not take the bait. I had already delivered my audit in person. I did not owe the public a rebuttal. The real threat didn't come from social media. It came, as I should have expected, from a new, unexpected angle. A week after Brielle's post, I received an email. It looked professional, legitimate. The sender was a Greg Russell, senior acquisition agent, at a local real estate group I'd never heard of. "Dear Ms. Martin," it read, "I am contacting you on behalf of a private, motivated, cash buyer who is actively seeking a 2-bedroom unit in Alder Row. I understand from your family that you may be looking to make a quick, discreet, off-market sale. My client is prepared to offer you an extremely generous sum, and we could close in as little as 10 days. All cash, no inspections." I stared at the words. "I understand from your family." I was about to delete it, to mark it as sophisticated spam, but then I saw the final sentence. "We can move as quickly as you'd like, as I understand from your mother, who referred me, that she has already provided the necessary authorization for me to act as your representative in this matter." My heart stopped. It literally stopped, and then hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. The necessary authorization from your mother, my mother, in Illinois, who had no power of attorney, who had no legal claim to my life, who had no signature authority on anything I owned. They weren't just manipulating, they were, committing fraud. Were they trying to sell my house out from under me? Had my mother actually signed some fake document? Convinced of her own matriarchal authority? Or was this realtor just a bottom feeder, lying to get a foot in the door? It didn't matter. The intent was clear. They were still trying to liquidate me. My fury was cold, sharp, and precise. I did not email him back in anger. I did not call my mother and scream. I set a trap. I replied to Greg Russell. "Mr. Russell," I typed. "This is very interesting. The timing might be perfect. I'm not free to come to your office, but I could spare 10 minutes tomorrow morning, say 9 a.m., in the lobby of my building. We can discuss your client's offer. Please bring all relevant paperwork, especially the authorization you mentioned. I'd like to review it." He replied in less than 60 seconds. 9 a.m. is perfect. Ms. Martin, see you then." The next morning, I was in the lobby at 8:50 a.m. I sat in one of the armchairs, my back to the wall, a clear view of the front desk and the elevators. I had my briefcase, which contained my work laptop. I also had my phone in my hand. I opened the voice recorder app and pressed record. I set the phone on the table next to me. Screen down. At 9:02 a.m., a man walked in. He did not look like the high-end brokers who usually work this building. His suit was cheap polyester, shiny at the elbows. He was carrying a worn-out, plastic-looking briefcase. He scanned the lobby, and I saw his oily smile land on me. "Ms. Martin," he asked, approaching. "Mr. Russell?" I said. I did not stand. I did not offer my hand. He sat, uninvited, in the chair opposite me. Thank you for meeting me. As I said, my client is prepared to move very, very fast. All cash. This could be the easiest transaction you ever make. Wonderful, I said, my voice pleasant and cool. Let's start with the authorization. May I see it? His smile twitched. Well, that's really just a formality. You know, a referral agreement. It's not. The one from my mother, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. The one you said gave you authority to act as my representative. I want to see it. Now. He started to sweat. I could see a small bead of perspiration on his hairline. He was bluffing, and he knew I was calling him on it. Look, Ms. Martin, he stammered, his smarmy confidence evaporating. It's just an email from her. She said you were motivated. She said, Did my mother, I interrupted, provide you with any document, signed by me, giving you, her, or anyone else the right to list, broker, or sell my property? Well, no, not signed by you, but she's your mother. She said, So you lied in your email, I stated. It wasn't a question. Now, wait a minute, he blustered. No, you wait, I said. I picked up my phone, still recording. You are here under false pretenses. You have misrepresented yourself, your client, and your authorization. You are, in fact, attempting to solicit a fraudulent transaction. I am recording this conversation. I have your email, and I will be forwarding both to your firm's managing broker, as well as the state licensing board, unless... He had gone a pale, sickly gray. Unless you get up, walk out that door, and delete my name, my address, and any of my family's information from your records, permanently. This is not a negotiation. This is your one and only chance to walk away from this without me filing a formal complaint. He didn't speak. He just grabbed his cheap briefcase. He stood up so fast the armchair scraped the floor. He practically ran out of the lobby. I sat there for another minute. I pressed stop on the recorder and saved the file. The realtor had run. But he wasn't the source of the problem. He was just a tool. The problem was my family. I had dealt with the immediate threat. Now I had to deal with the long-term one. I left the lobby, went to my office, and spent the next hour on the phone. I did not call my family. I called a real estate attorney. That afternoon, I was sitting in a high-rise office downtown. I explained the entire situation, clinically, leaving out the emotion. I told her about the uninvited visit, the financial demands, the social media posts, the email from the fraudulent realtor. The lawyer, a sharp woman in her 50s, listened without interrupting. When I was finished, she steepled her fingers. Wow, she said. This is extreme. You've essentially been the victim of an attempted, if poorly executed, fraudulent conveyance. We need to protect your title, immediately. She explained the process. We couldn't just get a restraining order against a bad idea. We had to make a public, legal declaration. That afternoon, we drafted and filed a notarized affidavit of non-sale with the city recorder's office. It was a document, now part of the public record tied to my property's deed, stating that I, Claire Martin, was the sole owner, that I had no intention of selling, and that any document claiming to represent my intent, not signed by me, in person, with a notary present, was to be considered fraudulent. It was a legal firewall. My house was secure. That night, my phone rang. It was Aunt Elise. She was crying. Claire Bear, she wept into the phone. I just saw Brielle's posts. I heard from your cousin about what happened. That photo. That stupid photo I posted. This is all my fault. I am so sorry. I was just trying to be proud. I let her cry for a minute. Then I spoke, my voice gentle. Aunt Elise, I said, listen to me. This is not your fault. You posted a nice picture. That is all. You are not responsible for their reaction. You are not responsible for their choices, their manipulations, or their attempts to commit fraud. I am not even responsible for their choices. They are... I am not angry at you. I know you didn't mean any harm. I'm handling it. There was a sniffle on the other end. You really are, she said, her voice full of wonder. You've got this. Yes, I said. I do. When Evan heard the story, he was white-knuckled with rage. His first protective instinct was to merge our lives. That's it, he said, pacing my living room. I'm moving in, or you move in with me. We sell my place. I don't care. This is insane. Claire, they won't dare pull this if I am physically here. It was a tempting offer. It was the old, familiar pattern: find a shield. Hide. I walked over to him and put my hands on his chest, stopping his pacing. No, I said, softly. What, Claire? I want to protect you. I know, I said, looking him in the eyes. And I love you for that. But this is the most important lesson I'm trying to learn. I cannot use you as a human shield. I cannot hide behind our relationship, this whole situation. It's not just a crisis. It's a test. It's teaching me how to stand on my own. Let's let this be the thing that teaches us how to manage boundaries, not just how to run away from them. I have to do this myself. He looked at me for a long moment, the anger in his eyes softening to awe. You, he said, are the strongest person I have ever met. The strange final piece of the puzzle fell into place at work. Arcadia was holding an internal leadership seminar, and my boss, Dr. Aris, had asked me to give a 20-minute talk on professional ethics. Claire, she'd said, you are the most rigidly ethical manager I have. You hold your team accountable, but you also protect them like a hawk from scope creep and corporate overreach. I want you to talk about that, about boundaries. So I did. I stood in front of my colleagues. I didn't tell my story, not the real one. I sanitized it. I turned my trauma into a case study. I talked about data integrity, resource allocation, and the right to say no. For my final slide, I put up a single sentence I had written the night before. A boundary is not a wall. It is not an act of aggression. It's a door. It has a lock that you, and only you, control. After the presentation, I went back to my desk. I sent a final email to my HOA, updating my guest list. I set up a time for a small, private housewarming party. Just Evan, Aunt Elise, and my two closest friends. No photos, no posts. I was in control. My firewall was built, my door was locked, and I was the only one with the key. After the legal firewall was established, the silence from Lakeview was no longer just a passive void. It was an acknowledged, enforced distance. Months passed. The binder on my shelf, marked Evidence, remained thin, but it felt heavy. A single-volume encyclopedia of my emancipation. I had my 30th birthday. It was a quiet, perfect affair. Evan took me to the coast. We rented a small cabin on the bluffs, and he gave me a simple silver bracelet that I never took off. Aunt Elise sent me a beautiful hand-thrown pottery vase, along with a text that just said, "For you, no pictures, I promise." My friends from work took me out for cocktails. It was a day filled, for the first time, only with people who saw me, knew me, and asked for nothing in return. My phone did not ring. The leaves in Alder Row turned gold, then fell. The first snows appeared on the mountain peak, visible from my balcony every morning. The 1-year anniversary of the invasion passed. It was just a normal Tuesday. Then, one evening, a text message arrived. It was from my mother. "Claire, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I broke your trust, your father, Brielle, and I would like to talk to you. The right way this time. We are prepared to come back to Rainier City, if you would let us, and just talk. You set the conditions. Whatever you say, we will do. We just want to see you." I read the message 5 times. It was the single most coherent, non-manipulative, and humble communication I had ever received from her. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a guilt trip. It was a request. I sat on my sofa, Pip snoring on my lap. I thought about it for a full hour. I thought about just saying no. I thought about ignoring it. But I also thought about my presentation at Arcadia. A boundary isn't a wall. It's a door with a lock. This was, I realized, the first time someone had knocked politely instead of trying to kick the door down. I was not crafting an emotional reply. I was drafting a clinical trial protocol. I picked up the phone and typed, "I am willing to meet with you under the following non-negotiable conditions. The meeting will not take place in my home. It will be in the building's shared community room, which I will reserve. 2. The meeting will be exactly 60 minutes long. I will set a timer. When it goes off, you will leave. 3. You may bring the children, but they will be expected to remain seated and read or play quietly. Any disruption, running, or handling of property will end the meeting immediately. 4. I paused, my thumb hovering over the last, most important point. 4. There will be absolutely no discussion of my finances. My salary, my property, my assets, my mortgage, my spending habits are not subjects for discussion. Any mention, however small, of my money or Brielle's debt will terminate the meeting. You will get one warning, a second violation, and it is over. Do you? And does Brielle agree to these terms? I hit send. My heart was pounding, but my hand was steady. The reply came in 2 parts. From Mom. Yes, we agree to all of it. Thank you. And then, a new text. From a number I hadn't seen in 2 years. Brielle. Okay, I agree. That was it. Okay. It was the most accountability I'd ever seen from her. I scheduled the meeting for a Saturday afternoon. I told Evan about it. I can be there, he offered immediately. I can be in the room. Just sit in the corner. Work on my laptop. No, I said, though I loved him for it. This isn't a buffer situation. This is a protocol test. I have to see if they can follow the protocol. Okay, he said, understanding. Then I'll be your extraction team. I'll be at the grind, the coffee shop on the corner. I'll have my phone on. You text me the word data breach, and I will call you with a life or death work emergency that requires you to leave immediately. You text me all clear when it's done. He was giving me a fire alarm, a way out, the day of. I went down to the community room an hour early. It was a neutral, sterile space, beige walls, a long conference table, some uncomfortable armchairs. It was perfect. I was not hosting them in my home. I was meeting them on neutral ground. I went to my desk. I pulled out the evidence binder. I took out Brielle's long, hateful email and the file from the fraudulent realtor. I placed them in my briefcase. Then I took out a new file, one I had spent the last week drafting. It was a single page, titled Memorandum of Boundaries. It was a contract. It was written in simple, clear, bullet-pointed language. It outlined, in black and white, what I was willing to do and what I was not willing to do. I will not provide financial support, loans, co-signatures, or access to my credit. Under any circumstances, I will be available for scheduled phone calls, no more than twice a month. I will not tolerate unannounced visits. All visits must be requested in writing at least 2 weeks in advance. I will not participate in discussions that involve blaming, name-calling, or guilt-tripping. The list went on. It was clear. It was precise. It was, I realized, the Constitution for my new, sovereign nation. I printed 4 copies. I stapled a copy of the Affidavit of Non-Sale to the back of each one, a silent, paper-clipped reminder that I would not be threatened. I went back to my apartment. I did not bake for them. I did not prepare snacks, but I did bake. I had a batch of my favorite honey oat scones, the ones I loved, sitting on my kitchen counter. I ate one, slowly, a reminder to myself that my preferences came first today. At 2:55 p.m., my intercom buzzed. "We're here," my mother's voice said. It was small. "I will meet you in the community room on the 1st floor," I said, my voice all business. "Turn left out of the elevator." I rode the other elevator down, my briefcase in hand. I felt like I was walking into a trial. I entered the room. They were already there, standing awkwardly in the middle of the floor, my mother, my father, Brielle, and the two girls. It was different. They weren't a conquering army. They looked lost. They were dressed in their traveling clothes, but they were subdued, cautious. They looked around the beige room, not with the appraising, greedy eyes they'd used in my apartment, but with a new, uncertain hesitation. My father was holding a small duffel bag. My mother's hands were clasped in front of her. Brielle was holding each of her daughter's hands, her phone nowhere to be seen, and the girls. Ava and Mia. They weren't running. They weren't yelling. They were just standing there. My heart did a strange, painful little flip. I turned to my nieces first. "Hi, Ava." "Hi, Mia," I said, and my voice was softer than I intended. "It's good to see you. How was the plane?" "It was bumpy," Ava said, her voice a little whisper. "Mommy said we have to be quiet," Mia added. I looked at Brielle. She flushed, a deep, painful red. But she didn't deny it. I smiled, a real, actual smile. "That is a very good rule for this room," I said to the girls, "and I have the perfect quiet time activity." I had brought the 2 graphic novels I'd given them before, the ones Brielle had tried to snatch back. I had also brought 2 new ones. I'd set them on a small table in the corner, far from the main conference table. "You can sit over there," I said, "and you can read anything you want. Thank you for being such good, respectful guests. I'm proud of you." I saw my father's shoulders slump in relief. I saw my mother's eyes brim with tears. I had given praise. I had rewarded the good behavior. The 3 adults sat at the conference table. I sat at the head. I placed my briefcase on the table. I took out my phone and set it. Screen up, on the table. I opened the timer app and set it for 60 minutes. I pressed start. They all watched the numbers begin to count down. 60 years. 59 to 59. "Okay," I said. "You have the floor." The first 10 minutes were the most agonizingly polite, sterile conversation I had ever had with them. My father talked about the weather in Lakeview. My mother asked about the mountain. Brielle said nothing. She just stared at her own hands, clasped on the table. It was tense. It was awful. And it was working. My mother, predictably, was the one who couldn't stand the politeness. She started to fidget. "Claire," she said, her voice trembling. We just wanted. We are so sorry. I know I messed up. I accept your apology. Mom," I said, cutting her off. "I do. But the apology is not what we're here to discuss. The apology is a feeling. I'm here to discuss the structure, the protocol, the actions." And then Brielle, my sister, who had been silent, finally broke. "I just don't get it," she muttered, her eyes hard, fixed on the table. "You had all this. You had this building, this money, and you just left us. You left me to drown." I looked at the timer. 8:30. "Brielle," I said, my voice low, "that is not what we are here to discuss. This is not about the past." "But it is," she said, her voice rising. "You had so much. You could have helped, I mean. God, even if you just sold this place." Thwack! It was the sound of my mother's foot, hard, kicking Brielle's shin under the table. Brielle gasped, her mouth snapping shut. The room went completely, utterly silent. The only sound was the faint click of the timer on my phone. 47:12. I did not yell. I did not stand up. I did not get angry. I just held up one hand, palm facing them. "Strike one," I said, my voice as calm as a winter morning. "Condition A has been violated. We are not discussing the sale of my property." My mother burst into tears. "Oh God, Brielle, I told you. My father looked like he was going to pass out. "Claire, please, it was a slip. She didn't mean it. We're sorry. Please." Brielle was staring at me, her eyes wide. She wasn't angry. She looked terrified. She had finally seen a boundary, a real one, with an immediate, enforceable consequence. I looked at the three of them, my mother, sobbing, my father, begging, my sister, in shock. "The meeting is not over," I said, my voice pulling them all back. But that was the warning. The protocol is clear. There will not be another. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out the 4 stapled packets. I slid one across the table to my father. I slid one to my mother. I slid one to Brielle. "You said you wanted to talk," I said. "This is how we talk. This is the memorandum of boundaries. This is the terms and conditions for a future relationship with me. It is not a negotiation. It is a protocol." They stared at the paper as if it were a bomb. "I am not going to relitigate the past," I said, standing up. "I am not going to sit here and listen to you list my failings, or me list yours. It is not productive. My feelings are my own. They are not a subject for debate. My actions, however, are what I control. This document," I said, gesturing to the packets, "outlines every expectation. It outlines what I will do. It outlines what I will not do. It outlines the consequences for violation. It is the only path forward. You don't have to read it now. In fact, I don't want you to. I want you to take it back to your hotel. I want you to read every single word. Read the affidavit stapled to the back. Understand what you did. Understand the legal line you almost crossed." My father's hand was shaking as he reached for the paper. My mother couldn't even look at it. Brielle just stared. "If you can agree to those terms," I said, "all of them, without exception, then I want you to sign the last page, and you can mail it to me when, and only when, I receive your signed copies. Will we move to the next step?" My father looked up, his eyes watery. And if we don't sign, then we are done," I said, my voice holding no malice. It was just a fact. "If you don't sign, then you are telling me you are not capable of respecting my boundaries, and I am telling you that I am no longer willing to have a relationship with people who will not. The choice is, for the first time, entirely yours." My father looked at the paper. He slowly, deliberately, folded it and put it in his jacket pocket. My mother slid hers into her purse, her hands trembling. Brielle, after a long, agonizing moment, picked hers up and held it. I looked at my phone. 32:15. "The meeting is over," I said. "We don't need the full hour." They stood up, like schoolchildren dismissed. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen them leave on my command. My father herded them toward the door. My mother, without looking at me, went and collected the girls, who obediently took her hands. My father was the last one at the door. "Claire," he said, his voice thick, We'll read it. We'll read it carefully." I just nodded. Once, the door closed. I was alone in the beige room. I picked up my phone and stopped the timer. I looked at the scone I had brought down with me, but hadn't eaten. I had done it. I sent a text to Evan. "All clear." Then I sat down at the head of the empty conference table, and for the first time in 31 years, I felt like the head of my own life. They hadn't argued. They hadn't fought. They had taken the terms. I had been naive. I had thought the meeting, the sterile beige room, the unargued-for terms, was a victory. I had mistaken a tactical retreat for a surrender. That night, the real counteroffensive began. Brielle had not gone back to the hotel to read carefully. She had gone back to load her weapon. At 10 p.m., my phone, which I had placed on its charger by my bed, began to vibrate. It didn't just buzz with a single text. It began a low, steady, furious tremor on the nightstand. A cascade of notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and my old text message threads. A cousin from Lakeview, one I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, had tagged me in a post. The post was a video. From Brielle. She was in her hotel room. The lighting was low. Her face angled perfectly into the camera. her eyes red and swollen. She was a master of her craft. The caption read, "My truth. I'm sorry to do this, but I am broken." I pressed play. The volume was off, but I didn't need to hear it. I could read the performance. It was a masterpiece of controlled hysteria. She wept. She talked about her dream. She talked about her struggle. She never, ever used my name. She talked, instead, about certain family members who had been blessed with so much, people who lived in palaces and had forgotten where they came from, people who would rather lecture a drowning person on their swimming technique than throw a life raft, people who were, she choked out on a perfectly timed sob, cold-blooded. She ended with a tearful, direct-to-camera plea for support, not from her cold-blooded family, but from her community. "A lot of you have asked how you can help," she wept. "This is it. My store is my life. Don't let them take this from me. 2. A link to her store's GoFundMe page appeared at the bottom. It was already spreading. The video had sad and angry reacts pouring in. My family, my extended, distant, clueless family, was eating it up. "Sending you love, Brielle. Stay strong. I can't believe some people. You know who you are. This is just heartbreaking. Disgusted." My cousin had tagged me with a single comment. "Claire Martin. Seriously, this is your sister." I watched the video twice. I felt the old familiar heat of shame and rage rise in my throat. The old Claire would have called her. Screaming. The old Claire would have posted a long, frantic, defensive reply, listing every grievance, trying to win over a jury that didn't care about the facts. I did not do that. I closed the app. I opened my email. I drafted a new message. The recipient was Brielle's private email address, the one she used for her business. The subject line was, "Your story." The body of the email was 2 sentences. "Brielle, you have chosen to tell your version of this story in a public forum, to your advantage. I will not engage with you on that level. But know this. If this public campaign continues, I will be forced to tell my story, with my evidence, in a public forum of my choosing, and when I am done, there will be no ambiguity. The choice, as always, is yours." I hit send. I turned my phone onto Do Not Disturb and went to sleep. The video was gone by morning. The next few weeks were quiet. I received the signed Memorandum of Boundaries from my father in the mail. His signature was firm. My mother's was a shaky, tear-stained scrawl. Brielle's page was, unsurprisingly, missing. The protocol was only partially engaged. Then, an email came from my HOA. The Alder Row Community Association was hosting its annual summer social in the large shared courtyard garden. They were inviting residents to share their passions. My building manager, the one who had helped me before, had sent a personal note. "Ms. Martin, I know you do a lot of work on clinical trials, but I also know your partner, Mr. Mercer, runs that wonderful rehab startup. Would you and he be willing to say a few words? We're setting up a small charitable drive, and we'd love to have you as our featured residents." I showed the email to Evan. His eyes lit up. "Claire, this is perfect. We can talk about the new grant program we're launching, a joint venture between Kinetic Bridge and the Alder Row Community Fund." It was a project we were deeply passionate about providing free, at-home rehab devices to low-income stroke survivors in the city. It was the first time my professional life and my personal life were merging in a way that felt good. The day of the event was bright and hot. The courtyard was filled with residents. People from the building, my neighbors, were sitting on lawn chairs, drinking lemonade. It was a beautiful, normal Saturday afternoon. Evan and I stood up on the small temporary stage. He spoke first, about the technology. Then I spoke, about the human side, about the need for ethical, accessible care, about the power of community to support recovery. I looked out at the crowd of friendly, nodding faces, my neighbors, my peers, and then I saw them. They were standing at the back of the courtyard, near the public entrance, just inside the gate, my mother, my father, and Brielle. They had not come in. They were just watching. My father looked uncomfortable. My mother looked pale. And Brielle looked like a wolf. Aunt Elise was with them, looking profoundly distressed. She must have been the leak. She must have mentioned the event. And they had just shown up. It was a public space, an open event. They were, technically, within the rules. I felt a jolt of pure, cold adrenaline. But I did not falter. I did not lose my place. I finished my speech. And that is why we believe that boundaries are not just about protecting ourselves, but about creating safe, structured spaces where everyone can heal. Thank you. The applause was warm. My neighbors came up to shake my hand, to ask about the program. Claire, that was wonderful. Mr. Mercer, how can we donate? I was in the middle of a conversation with my neighbor from 7B when I felt a presence, a shadow. Brielle had pushed through the small crowd. Her face was a mask of desperate, smiling politeness. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen. Claire, she said, her voice a high, tight, false, cheerful whisper. The neighbors around us turned, smiling, thinking this was a family reunion. That was such a good speech, so inspiring. Brielle, I said, my voice neutral. What are you doing here? I just needed to talk to you, she whispered, leaning in, her eyes darting to the neighbors who were still watching. Claire, I listened. I read your paper. I get it. No more asking for money. I understand. A+. You win. I waited. I knew this was the wind-up. But, she continued, her voice dropping even lower, I was thinking, you don't have to give me anything. What I really need, is just a loan. Not from you, from a bank. And my credit is, well, I just need a cosigner, someone with a good asset base. It wouldn't cost you a dime. Claire, it would just be your name, just your name on a piece of paper. She was asking me, in front of my neighbors, to cosign a loan, to tie my financial future, my home, my perfect credit, to her sinking, $46,000 ship. I looked at her. I looked at the smiling, oblivious neighbors. I looked at my mother and father, who were hovering 10 feet away, a small, pathetic flanking force. I did not raise my voice. I did not cause a scene. Brielle, I said, my voice clear and calm, just loud enough for the people next to us to hear. This is a public, social event. It is not the appropriate venue for a complex financial discussion. I am not willing to have this conversation here. The neighbors' smiles faltered. But Claire, she hissed. We will go to a private room, I continued, as if she hadn't spoken. And we will bring a neutral, third-party witness. I turned to the building manager, who had been standing by the donation table. Mr. Henderson, would you be available for a few minutes? My family has a business matter to discuss, and I would appreciate your presence as an HOA representative. Mr. Henderson, who had seen the fraudulent realtor, understood immediately. Of course, Ms. Martin, why don't we use the community room? Brielle was frozen. This was not the plan. She had been ambushed. And, Aunt Elise, I called out, my voice kind. Would you please join us? 2 as a witness. Aunt Elise, her face a picture of relief, nodded quickly. I walked away from the crowd. I didn't look back to see if they were following. I just knew they would. We filed into the beige community room. It was the same table, the same chairs, but the dynamic was entirely different. I sat at the head. Evan stood behind me, his hand on my shoulder. Mr. Henderson sat at the other end. Aunt Elise, my mother, and my father sat on one side. Brielle, alone, sat on the other. All right, I said, opening my briefcase. Let's begin. I pulled out the evidence binder. It was thicker now. Brielle, you have just, in a public setting, attempted to solicit a co-signature on a loan, correct? I was just asking, she stammered. It was a solicitation, I said. And it is, once again, a direct violation of the terms we are trying to establish. I pulled out the Memorandum of Boundaries. I placed it in the center of the table. I would like to direct everyone's attention to Article 2, Section 4, No direct or indirect financial exploitation. That includes, but is not limited to, requests for loans, gifts, co-signatures, or use of credit. I then looked at Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson. The building manager cleared his throat. He opened his own binder, which was the Alder Row HOA bylaws. Thank you, Ms. Martin. For the record, I would like to remind everyone present of HOA Bylaw 11.7. Solicitation. No resident or guest may engage in the solicitation of other residents, in any form, for financial, political, or commercial purposes within public or private areas of the building. Ms. Martin, he said, looking at me, has every right to file a formal complaint, which could result in a fine and a formal ban of the non-resident guest from the property. My mother gasped. Brielle's face was a color I had never seen before. It was pure, unadulterated shame. This is, my father started. This, I said, my voice flat, is what a boundary looks like when it is enforced. My mother, finally, broke. Oh, God, she said, putting her head in her hands. I'm so sorry. Claire, I let this get so out of hand. I wanted my family back. I didn't. Brielle, this is enough. So you're all against me, Brielle exploded, standing up. Fine, it's all fine. I'm just the failure. I'm the one you all get to kick you and your... The answer is no, I said, my voice cutting through her tirade like a laser. She stopped, her mouth open. The answer to the co-signature is no. The answer to a loan is no. The answer to cash is no. That door is closed, locked, and legally reinforced. It will never, ever open. Do you understand me? Brielle. She just stared at me, her rage giving way to a hollow, empty shock. However, I said, and the air in the room changed. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a new folder. This one was thin. I am not, however, willing to let this entire family implode over this. It is a waste of resources. I slid the folder across to Brielle. That is a one-time only settlement offer. It is not cash. It is not my name. She opened it, confused. It is an offer, I said. For 3 two-hour consulting sessions with me. Session 1. We will perform a full audit of your remaining inventory and create a liquidation strategy. Session 2. We will build a simple, accurate profit and loss statement and identify your break-even point. Session 3. We will build a 3-month operating budget and a 1-year debt repayment plan. I am not giving you my money, I said. I am offering to teach you, in 3 sessions, how to manage your own... Brielle was just staring at the paper, and then Aunt Elise spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it was strong. And I want to help, too, she said. Everyone turned. I was so ashamed, she said, looking at me. About the photo, about all this. She looked at Brielle. Brielle, your business is your business, but I can't support it. It's not right. So, instead, Aunt Elise continued, opening her own purse. In honor of the new charitable fund Claire announced today, I'm making my own donation. She pulled out a checkbook. I am funding, from my own retirement, 5 vocational training scholarships for women at the local community center. $500 each. She looked at me. To help 5 other women learn to save themselves, just like you did. Claire. It was a masterstroke. In one moment, my aunt had pivoted. She had taken the toxic, desperate, selfish energy of Save Brielle's Shop and transformed it into Help 5 Women Build a Future. The air was sucked out of Brielle's crisis. It was suddenly so small, so petty. Brielle looked at the consulting offer. She looked at Aunt Elise's checkbook. She looked at my face, calm, professional. She said nothing. She just grabbed the folder, stood up, and stormed out of the community room. The door slammed shut. My father put his head in his hands. But my mother did not move. She sat there, straight-backed, for a full minute. She looked at me. She looked at Evan. She looked at Mr. Henderson. Then, she reached into her purse. She pulled out the folded, tear-stained copy of the Memorandum of Boundaries, the one Brielle had refused to sign. She pulled a pen from her bag. She spread the document on the table. She smoothed it with her hand, and, in the dead, silent, astonished room, my mother, for the first time in her life, picked up the pen, and she signed her name on the dotted line. After my mother, father, and Aunt Elise left the community room, the silence was absolute. My mother and father had left in a daze, clutching their unsigned copies of the memorandum, my father's signature being a small, solitary act of compliance. Aunt Elise, however, had lingered by the door, her face a mess of guilt and relief. "Claire Bear," she whispered, twisting the strap of her purse. "I have to. There's something else. About Brielle. About the debt." I was already exhausted. I had my win. I had my signed document from my mother. I just wanted to go upstairs, lock my door, and feed Pip. "Aunt Elise," I said, my voice tired. "It's done. Whatever it is, it's—" "No, you don't understand," she said, her voice dropping. "That number, the 46,800, it's not all. Business, a huge chunk of it is a penalty." I stopped, my briefcase in hand. "A penalty. From her lease," she said, her words rushing out. She was so stupid. Claire, she was desperate for that specific, high-end location in the new outdoor mall. The landlord was a shark. I read the contract before she signed it. I told her, "Brielle, this clause, this early termination penalty is 3 times the normal rate. It's predatory." I begged her not to sign it. I knew exactly what came next. But she signed it anyway. "She told me I was negative," Aunt Elise said, her eyes flashing with old resentment. "She said I didn't understand her brand. She said you have to spend money to make money. And now, that penalty is the $22,000 anvil that's dragging her, and your parents, to the bottom of the river." My mind, the clinical, analytical part of my mind, whirred to life. This was not emotion. This was data, a new, critical data point. "Do you have a copy of that lease?" I asked. Aunt Elise looked at me, stunned. "Yes, she sent me a copy 2 years ago. When she was asking me to co-sign, I never deleted the email." "Forward it to me," I said. "Now." I went upstairs, not to rest, but to work. This was not a family problem anymore. This was a data audit. The email from Aunt Elise arrived. I opened the PDF of the lease. It was, as she'd said, a disaster, a 50-page document designed to strip mine a naive tenant. The early termination clause was, indeed, egregious. But it was a contract, and a contract is just a set of protocols. I spent an hour reading it, highlighting sections, cross-referencing clauses, and then I found it. Section 9B, landlord responsibilities, and 14C, breach of contract. I didn't call my own real estate lawyer. This was different. I called a contact, a woman I'd met at a Women in Tech seminar, who ran a pro bono legal aid clinic for small business owners. I sent her the lease, along with a 1-page summary of my findings. "I'm not asking for representation," I wrote. "I'm asking for a sanity check. Am I reading this right? The landlord was responsible for all HVAC maintenance. I have a witness who can testify the air conditioning was broken for 3 straight months during the summer. A clear violation of 9B. Does that not, per 14C, void the penalty for early termination?" The lawyer called me back in an hour. "Ms. Martin," she said, her voice crisp and impressed. "You are 100% correct. Your sister's landlord is in breach. Not only is he in breach, but because he was notified in writing, which I see your aunt has records of and failed to cure, he is in material breach. She doesn't owe him the penalty. He owes her for business interruption. I felt a cold, clean satisfaction. So the penalty is gone, the lawyer said. This is a slam dunk. He'll hightail it the second he sees a demand letter. You're not just saving her the $18,000 to $22,000 in penalties. She could probably get her deposit back. I thanked her. She offered to have one of her junior associates draft the letter. I gave her Brielle's contact information. I did not call my sister. I did not text her. I did not forward the lawyer's email. I drafted a new one. The recipient was Brielle. The subject was lease agreement, a resolution path. Brielle, I wrote, I have had your commercial lease reviewed by a legal professional. A critical error was found. The landlord, not you, is in breach of contract. This violation, per Section 14C, invalidates the early termination penalty. I have taken the liberty of connecting your case to a pro bono legal aid clinic that specializes in this. A lawyer named Ms. Evans will be contacting you shortly. She has offered to draft the demand letter on your behalf, free of charge. This is a legal, not a personal matter. You are not obligated to accept this help, but the data indicates this is the most effective path to resolving a significant portion of your stated debt. I paused. I was about to sign it. Claire, but I added one more line. I am not giving you my money. I am not giving you my name, but I am offering you this information. This is the last time. Do what you want with it. I hit send. The silence, this time, lasted for 3 full days. I didn't know if she'd taken the call. I didn't know if she'd told the lawyer to get lost. It wasn't my business. I had presented the data. The protocol was complete. On the 3rd night, a single email arrived from Brielle. I'll look into it. It was not, thank you. It was not, you saved me. It was, for Brielle. The closest thing to, I accept, that I had ever heard. I deleted the email and considered the case closed. That night, Evan insisted on celebrating. He cooked, he made my favorite pasta, and he even, ridiculously, grilled a tiny, unseasoned steak for Pip, who sat on his mat, looking up at us with a profound, almost religious gratitude. So you did it, Evan said, raising his glass of wine. You didn't just build a boundary, you enforced it. You survived the counter-assault, and then you gave them a structured, non-monetary solution. You're a clinical trial. Claire, you're a complete, peer-reviewed, multi-phase success story. I laughed. Pip got a steak. I got a legal win. I'll take it. As we were finishing dinner, my phone, which I'd left on the counter, buzzed, and then buzzed again. I walked over. It was 2 text messages, one from my mother, one from my father. I opened my mother's first. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a lament. It was quiet. Claire, I just wanted to tell you, I have been reading the document you gave me, the memorandum. I read it every night. And I am so ashamed. I am so sorry. Not for us. I am sorry for you. I am sorry for what I did to you, for what I let happen. You don't need to reply. I wanted you to know that I'm reading the words. I am finally really reading them. I felt a strange, painful pressure behind my eyes. I had been ready for a fight. I had been ready for a negotiation. I had not been ready for comprehension. Then, I opened my father's. It was a picture message. No text. It was a photo, taken in the cluttered garage I knew so well. It was a picture of an old, spindle-backed wooden chair. My chair. The one that had been in my bedroom as a child. The one I used to do my homework on. One of its legs had been wobbly for 15 years. A split in the wood that my father had always said he'd get around to. In the photo, the leg was fixed. It was clamped, glued, and sanded. It looked strong. A second text came through from him, right after. It was wobbly, it read. I fixed it. I'm learning that I need to ask permission before I try to fix things that aren't mine to touch. I'm proud of you, kiddo. I had to sit down. I had survived the invasion. I had survived the financial audit. I had survived the public humiliation and the legal battle. But a text message from my mother and a picture of a chair, that was the thing that finally broke me. These were not tears of sadness, or even of joy. They were tears of release. The old toxic, suffocating structure was dissolving, and in its place, something new was beginning to sprout. It was not forgiveness. It was not a happy ending. It was just a tiny, fragile, and utterly unexpected seedling of awareness. A week later, I got an email from Brielle. Subject: scheduling. Body: are you free on Tuesday at 7 p.m. for session 1? I stared at it. She had taken the legal help I'd heard from the lawyer that the landlord had caved immediately, and now she was taking the consulting offer. The next 3 weeks were the most surreal experience of my life. We met via Zoom. Once a week. I was not Claire, her sister. I was Miss Martin, her consultant. And she was not Brielle, the victim. She was a client, a sullen, difficult, but ultimately compliant client. Session 1. The inventory. Good evening, Brielle, I said, my voice all business. Pull up your sales data. She shared her screen. It was a nightmare. Brielle, I said, why do you have 800 units of an extra small, sequin top in electric lime? It was a good deal, she mumbled. It is not a good deal if it doesn't sell, I said. Right now, 27% of your entire capital is dead. It is sitting in this box of lime green tops. We are not ordering new stock. We are not expanding. We are liquidating. Tomorrow, you will run a flash sale. 70% off. Your goal is not profit. Your goal is cash flow. You are turning this asset back into cash. Do you understand? She nodded, her face pale. Session 2. The leaks. Your return policy, I said, pulling up another spreadsheet. It says store credit only, and yet, I see, on these 3 dates, cash refunds to, let's see, Jenna M. and Sarah P., your 2 best friends. Brielle flushed. You are leaking cash, I said, my voice flat. You are prioritizing your social life over your business. This stops, as of today. The policy is all sales final. You will put a banner on the website, no exceptions, no. Jenna's birthday, exceptions. You are a business, not a slush fund. Session 3. The strategy. I shared my own screen. It was a simple PL I had built for her. This, I said, is you are, on average, $3,000 in the red, every single month. Your win with the landlord just erased your past. It did not fix your future. You cannot afford this. You have to cut overhead. We went through it. We cut her subscription boxes. We cut her branding expenses. We cut her, and this, I said, adding a final line item to her new, meager budget. This is the most important part of your new business strategy. I typed the words, zero-based family financing. This, I said, means you do not borrow from mom and dad. You do not ask your aunt for a loan. You do not ask your sister for a co-signature. This business, from this day forward, survives on its own numbers. If it cannot, you let it fail. It is not a family obligation. It is a business. This is your new protocol. She stared at the screen for a long time. I could see the old familiar anger swelling. I could see the victimhood rising. And then, it just deflated. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I get it. We ended the call. I realized, shaking, I had just given the most difficult presentation of my life. 1 week later, a plain, white envelope arrived in my mailbox. not from my father. I opened it. It was one single sheet of paper. It was the signature page from my memorandum of boundaries. At the bottom, in her big, loopy, high school signature, was the name Brielle Martin. I held the paper in my hand. I had not expected it. I had not required it, after the consulting, but here it was. The protocol was complete. My phone rang as I was staring at the signature. It was my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Hi, honey," she said. Her voice was light. I'm not calling about anything. I just wanted to call. Your father and we were thinking," I braced myself. "We were thinking," she continued, "that we've never really seen Rainier City. Your aunt said the museums are lovely. We were thinking of, maybe, coming out next month, just to be tourists." "Oh," I said, my voice cautious. And we were wondering," she said, and I could hear her take a deep breath. If you were free, maybe, on that Saturday, say the 15th, around 6 p.m. We were wondering if we could take you out to dinner, our treat." I stopped. I looked at the signed paper in my hand. They were asking, they were scheduling, they were offering, not taking. I opened the calendar on my laptop. "Yes, Mom," I said, and I was surprised to find I was smiling. 6 p.m. on the 15th works for me. I'll make a reservation." The second Alder Row Community Social was nothing like the first. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue, and the courtyard, instead of being a place of ambush, was a place of celebration. This time, I was not a target. I was the guest of honor. I stood on the small stage, the same one from before, but the energy was transformed. Evan stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. We were here as partners, in every sense of the word. We were the main speakers, here to officially launch the Kinetic Bridge Alder Row Rehabilitation Fund. The audience was full. My neighbors, my colleagues, the HOA board, and, sitting in the second row, were my parents. They had come to dinner. The dinner, scheduled a month prior, had been quiet, polite. My mother had asked me about my work and had actually listened to the answer. My father had talked about the chair he'd fixed and had asked me if there was anything else in my home that needed a proper look. They had not mentioned money. They had not mentioned Brielle. They had, per the memorandum, left at the agreed-upon time. Now, they sat in the audience, not as invaders, but as guests. They were not whispering. They were not coordinating. They were just watching me, listening. I spoke, my voice clear and amplified by the small microphone. I talked about our new program, about the first 5 patients who would be receiving their at-home rehab devices next week, fully funded. I talked about the data, the ethics, and the power of a community that invests in its own. My parents just beamed. It was not the grasping, our Claire pride from the Facebook comments. It was a quiet, profound, and separate pride, the kind I had always wanted. As I finished, the applause was warm and genuine. Evan and I stepped off the stage, and our neighbors crowded around, shaking our hands, signing up to volunteer. That's when I saw her, Brielle. She was standing at the edge of the crowd, not pushing, not demanding. She was just waiting. She was dressed, not in her usual influencer costume, but in a simple, dark blazer. She looked professional. She looked tired, but she also looked, for the first time in her life, settled. She was holding a simple, white business envelope. When the crowd thinned, she walked over. She didn't ambush me. She didn't start with a demand. She just held out the envelope. "What's this?" I asked. It's the settlement letter," she said, her voice low, no one else hearing. "From the landlord. The lawyer you found. She was like a shark. A nice shark." I looked at the envelope. He folded, immediately, Brielle said, and I saw a flash of her old, dramatic self. But it was different. It was genuine. He didn't just waive the penalty. He had to pay back my deposit and 2 months' rent, with interest, the full $20,000. That's, I said, stunned. That's incredible. Brielle, that's a huge win. I waited. I waited for the, and now I need. I waited for the, so about. It never came. She just looked at me. Her eyes, for the first time, not filled with envy or need, but with a strange, complex, and new respect. And then she did something that shocked me more than any invasion. She stepped up to the stage, took the microphone from the podium, and tapped it. The small feedback squeal quieted the crowd. "Hi," she said, her voice shaking, but clear. "Hi, everyone. I'm Claire's sister, Brielle." My blood ran cold. My father started to stand up, to stop her, but my mother put a hand on his arm and sat him back down. "I'm not on the program," Brielle continued, "but I had to say something." She looked out at the crowd, and then she looked directly at me. "My sister, Claire, she and we've had a difficult history. Mostly my fault. I came here a while ago, and I asked her to save me. I demanded she give me her money to fix my problems." The crowd was silent. My father had his face in his hands. "And she said no," Brielle said, her voice cracking. "She said no, and I hated her for it. I was a monster to her, but..." She held up the envelope. "My sister didn't give me her money," she said, her voice suddenly strong, echoing over the courtyard. "She gave me something infinitely more valuable. She gave me the tools, and the data, and the legal right to save myself." She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears I knew, for once, were not performative. "She didn't give me a fish. She taught me how to read a predatory lease and sue the landlord who stole from me, and I just wanted to say thank you, in front of all of you." She set the microphone down and walked, quickly, back into the crowd, not looking at anyone. There was a stunned, perfect silence, and then, my mother stood up. She was trembling. She walked to the front, near the stage, and she did not pick up the microphone. She just looked at me, her hands clasped. "Daughter," she said, her voice clear and caring in the quiet. When I first saw what you had built here, this life, this beautiful home, I called your achievement extravagant. I called it too much. I was wrong." She took a wobbly breath. "Today," she said, her voice breaking, but her eyes firm, "I do not call it extravagant. I call it your life, and it is the most beautiful, well-earned life I have ever seen, and I promise you, I will always ask permission before I try to step into it again." She didn't just bow her head. She bowed, a small, formal, Japanese-style bow of profound, absolute respect, an apology, a surrender. I was not crying. I was just breathing. "Mr. Henderson," the building manager, his eyes suspiciously bright, stepped up to the microphone, clearing his throat. "Well," he said, his voice cheerful. "Thank you, Claire and Evan and your entire wonderful family. It is now my great honor to ask Claire Martin to officially dedicate the new Alder Row Rehabilitation Corner, Claire." He gets to a small, roped-off alcove near the courtyard entrance. A large silver ribbon was strung across it. Evan was suddenly at my side. He held out his hand, not to take mine, but to give me something, a large, absurdly shiny pair of silver scissors. "Go on," he whispered, his eyes full of a love so profound it almost buckled my knees. "Cut the protocol." I took the scissors. Our fingers touched, warm, electric, and real. I walked over to the alcove. My parents were there, standing to the side, my mother holding my father's hand. I stood in front of the ribbon. The light from the afternoon sun hit the silver metal of the scissors, hit the shimmering silver ribbon. It was all bright. And as I stood there, my phone, in my pocket, vibrated. Just once. I didn't need to look, but I did. I pulled it out. It was a text message. From a new group chat. The name at the top wasn't The Circle. It was Family by Invitation. The message was from my mother. "Hello, darling. We are just so proud. We are wondering if you are free. Next Saturday, around 3 to 4 p.m., just for a quick visit. We'd like to drop something off." A second text, from my father, came in immediately after. "We're bringing honey cakes, your favorite." I looked at the message. I looked at the memory of the sour cream, and I smiled. A real, full, deep smile. I typed back, one-handed, holding the scissors in the other. "Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you for asking first." I put the phone back in my pocket. From somewhere across the courtyard, I heard a single, sharp, happy bark. Pip, who Evan's friend had been watching, had heard my voice. It was the perfect, final, punctuation mark. I stood straight. I looked at the ribbon. I raised the scissors, the silver catching the sun, and I cut. The snip of the ribbon was sharp, and it was drowned out, immediately, by the sound of applause. It was the most satisfying sound in the world. It was the click of a deadbolt sliding into place. It was the sound of a protocol being marked complete. I hadn't sold my house. I hadn't opened my wallet. I hadn't even given them a key. I had just, finally, opened my door. At the right time, for the right people, under the exact, precise, and non-negotiable terms I had written myself. I turned from the cut ribbon, the applause washing over me. I looked through the glass doors of the community room, and I could see the poster we had hung for the event, the one Evan had designed. "Boundaries are love in structure." I looked past it, out the window, at the sharp, clear, permanent peak of the mountain, white and shining in the sun. I took a deep breath. It wasn't the ragged, shallow breath of someone bracing for a blow. It was the long, slow, full breath of a person who was, for the first time, simply choosing. The community room door opened, and the sunlight flooded in. Thank you all so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share your thoughts and where you're tuning in from in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories and like this video, if you can. Please also support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.